Imagine waking up, opening your eyes, and making yourself a promise. This time, will be different. This time, I'll save more money. I'll stop procrastinating. I'll be more patient with the people I love. I'll finally start exercising. I'll stop overtrading. I'll stop wasting opportunities. I'll stop making the same mistake. For a moment, you genuinely believe it. You feel motivated, hopeful, determined. You imagine the person you're about to become. Then, life happens. A stressful day at work, an unexpected expense, an argument, a little boredom, a little loneliness, a little fear. And almost without thinking, you find yourself making the very decision you promised yourself you wouldn't make. Again. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months become years. Different circumstances, different people, different jobs, but somehow, the same outcome. Have you ever stopped and asked yourself, why? Why do intelligent people keep making the same financial mistakes? Why do people return to relationships they know are unhealthy? Why do capable people procrastinate on the very goals they care about most? Why does someone promise they'll never lose their temper again, only to explode a few days later? Why does a trader spend hours analyzing the perfect setup, only to ignore the plan and take the impulsive trade instead? Why? Because most of us don't have a decision problem. We have a pattern problem. And until we understand the pattern, we'll keep blaming ourselves for outcomes we don't fully understand. Today, I want to show you something that completely changed the way I think about personal growth. Because the biggest obstacle to change isn't a lack of intelligence. It isn't laziness. It isn't even a lack of motivation. It's something much quieter than that. It's repetition. One of the biggest lies we quietly believe is that knowledge automatically creates change. If I read one more book, if I watch one more motivational video, if I learn one more strategy, then I'll finally become the person I want to be. But life has a way of exposing that illusion, because information doesn't automatically become transformation. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to give someone else advice that you struggle to follow yourself? We know we should save. We know we should forgive. We know we should exercise. We know we should spend less than we earn. We know we should put the phone down and be present with our families. We know. We know. We know. And yet, we don't always do it. Knowledge isn't the problem. Patterns are. In fact, there's something even more frustrating. Sometimes, learning more actually makes us feel worse. Because now, we're repeating the same mistake with full awareness. And that creates something dangerous. Shame. You begin asking questions like, why can't I change? What's wrong with me? Why do I keep ending up here? But perhaps you're asking the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, what pattern have I been practicing? Because your brain is always learning. Every repeated decision, whether it's wise or destructive, becomes a little easier to repeat the next time. Not because you're weak, but because that's exactly how the brain was designed. The good news is that this works both ways. If unhealthy patterns can be learned, healthy ones can be learned too. To understand this, let me introduce you to someone we'll simply call Michael. Michael is 28 years old, bright, hardworking, ambitious. He recently landed a promotion at one of the country's top consulting firms. For the first time in his life, he feels like everything is finally coming together. Every month, his salary arrives. He smiles. He tells himself, I've made it. He moves into a nicer apartment. He upgrades his phone. He buys a newer car. Weekend dinners become more expensive. Vacations become more frequent. The wardrobe gets an upgrade. And because each purchase seems affordable on its own, he never stops to look at the bigger picture. From the outside, Michael looks successful. His social media tells the story everyone wants to believe. beautiful restaurants, airport photos, a stylish apartment, friends laughing over coffee. Everything looks perfect. But social media rarely photographs anxiety. What nobody sees is the final week before payday. The account balance getting lower and lower and lower. The quiet calculations. Can I make this last until Friday? The credit card. The small loan from a friend. The promise. Next month I'll do better. Then payday comes. Relief. Followed almost immediately by another month of the exact same cycle. The strange thing is, Michael doesn't think he's in trouble. After all, he has a good job. His salary keeps increasing. His career is moving forward. He tells himself something millions of people tell themselves every single day. I'll start saving when I earn a little more. But here's what Michael doesn't realize. His income isn't growing faster than his lifestyle. His lifestyle is growing just as fast as his income. Without knowing it, he has become trapped, not by a lack of money, but by a pattern. This is what psychologists call unconscious incompetence, a blind spot. You're making mistakes without realizing they're mistakes. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Every single one of us has blind spots, areas where we think we're doing just fine, while quietly drifting further away from the life we actually want. The tragedy isn't that Michael lacks potential. He has plenty of potential. The tragedy is that potential without awareness rarely changes anything, because you cannot change what you cannot see. And for Michael, life is about to show him exactly what he's been missing. Life has a way of exposing the patterns we work so hard to ignore. For Michael, that moment arrived on an ordinary Friday night. It had been a long week. Deadlines, meetings, client presentations. His colleagues suggested going out for a few drinks. "You've earned it," they said. Michael smiled. One drink became two. Two became a few more. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. At least, that's what it felt like. Later that evening, he picked up his car keys. He paused for a second. A quiet voice inside him whispered, "Maybe you shouldn't drive." But another voice answered even louder, "You're fine. It's only a short drive. Nothing's going to happen." How often do our biggest mistakes begin with those exact words? Just this once. Michael started the engine. The roads were quiet. The music was playing softly. Everything seemed normal, until it wasn't. A few moments later, headlights, brakes, tires screaming against the road, metal twisting, glass shattering. Then, silence. By God's grace, no one lost their life that night. Michael walked away with only minor injuries, but his car was completely destroyed. Standing beside the wreckage, something inside him began to break. Not just because he had lost a car, but because, for the first time, he realized how quickly life can change. A few days later, another blow arrived. His insurance company rejected his claim. The investigation showed he had been driving under the influence. The policy was clear. There would be no payout, no compensation, no second chance. Michael sat in silence. He looked at his bank account. He stared at the numbers. Then he did something he had avoided doing for years. He calculated his finances honestly. No emergency fund, no meaningful savings, no investments, no financial cushion. Years of earning a good salary, yet one unexpected event had pushed him into crisis. The accident wasn't what frightened him most. The accident simply revealed what had already been true all along. His life looked secure, but it wasn't. And that's the thing about reality. It has a way of revealing what appearances can hide. For the first time, Michael stopped blaming circumstances. He stopped saying, "If only I earned more," because he finally saw the truth. More income had never been the answer. He had been earning enough to build security. He had simply built a lifestyle instead. This is what psychologists call conscious incompetence. You finally see the problem, but seeing it doesn't mean you've solved it. In many ways, This is the most painful stage of growth, because now you know. You know you're overspending. You know you're procrastinating. You know that relationship is hurting you. You know anger keeps damaging the people you love. You know fear keeps controlling your decisions. You know revenge trading has cost you thousands. You know. And yet, you still feel pulled toward the same behaviors. That's the frustrating part. Awareness doesn't instantly erase old patterns. It simply turns the lights on. Think about walking into a dark room. You switch on the light, and suddenly you see the mess. The light didn't create the mess. It only revealed what was already there. Awareness works the same way. It doesn't create your problems. It reveals them. And while that can feel discouraging, it's actually the beginning of freedom. Because you cannot change what you refuse to acknowledge. There's a powerful idea in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. He explains that every habit follows a simple cycle. First, there's a cue. Something triggers your brain. Then comes a craving. Your mind starts looking for relief, comfort, or pleasure. Next comes the response, the action you take. And finally, the reward. Your brain learns, that worked. So the next time the same cue appears, the cycle repeats. Again and again and again. The problem isn't that Michael lacked self-control. His brain had simply rehearsed the same financial habits, month after month, year after year. They had become automatic. That's why information alone wasn't enough. Reading another personal finance book wouldn't automatically change decades of practiced behavior, because knowledge informs the mind, but repetition rewires it. And perhaps that's why so many of us become discouraged. We expect one decision to undo years of repetition. But that's not how transformation works. The patterns that took years to build are usually replaced, one intentional choice at a time. Michael couldn't change what had already happened. The accident was behind him. The money was gone. The consequences were real. But for the first time in his life, he stopped asking, "Why did this happen to me?" And he started asking, "What needs to change in me?" That single question would become the turning point of his life. The morning after Michael asked himself, "What needs to change in me?" Nothing looked different. His bank account was still struggling. The car was still gone. The consequences of his choices were still real. Life hadn't magically improved overnight, but something inside him had. For the first time, Michael stopped looking for a quick fix. He stopped searching for another budgeting app, another motivational video, another promise that this time, everything would be different. Instead, he made one simple decision. I'm going to build better patterns. Not bigger dreams, better patterns. The first thing he did was automate his future. The day his salary arrived, before paying for entertainment, before shopping, before eating out, before upgrading anything, he paid his future self first. A portion went into an emergency fund, another portion into long-term investments. At first, the amounts weren't impressive. In fact, they felt almost insignificant. But Michael had learned something important. Small decisions, repeated consistently, become extraordinary results. Then he looked at the habits surrounding his money. He unsubscribed from promotional emails that tempted him to buy things he didn't need. He deleted shopping apps that turned boredom into spending. He started tracking every expense, not because he wanted to obsess over money, but because he wanted to understand himself. He discovered something surprising. His biggest spending wasn't driven by need. It was driven by emotion, stress, comparison, loneliness, the desire to reward himself after difficult days. For years, he thought he had a money problem. In reality, he had an emotional pattern that expressed itself through money. And once he saw that, everything began to make sense. Because every habit is trying to solve a problem. Sometimes, it's solving the wrong one. The journey wasn't glamorous. There were months when he wanted to quit. Months when friends laughed at him for saying, "Not this weekend." Months when investing felt pointless because the numbers barely moved. Months when he questioned whether the sacrifices were worth it. But every time he chose wisdom over impulse, Something invisible was happening. He wasn't just changing his finances, he was changing himself. Slowly, almost unnoticed, discipline became less exhausting. Budgeting became normal. Saving became normal. Planning ahead became normal. Peace became normal. One day, Michael noticed something remarkable. An unexpected expense appeared. The kind of situation that would once have sent him into panic. But this time, he smiled. Not because the problem was enjoyable, but because he was prepared. He transferred money from his emergency fund, paid the expense, and carried on with his day. No borrowing, no anxiety, no sleepless nights. In that quiet moment, he realized something. The greatest reward wasn't the money he had saved. It was the person he had become. This is what psychologists call unconscious competence. The right decision no longer required constant effort. Wisdom had become his default setting. Not because he was born disciplined, not because he had stronger willpower than everyone else, but because repeated choices had reshaped his character. Thousands of years before modern psychology, the Apostle Paul described a struggle that still feels familiar today. He wrote, "For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing." Have you ever felt that? Knowing the right thing, wanting the right thing, and still finding yourself pulled toward the wrong thing. Paul understood something we still wrestle with today. The battle isn't only around us, it's within us. But Scripture doesn't leave us there. In Romans chapter 12, Paul writes, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Notice that word again. Pattern. Not simply actions, not isolated decisions. Patterns. God says something that science continues to discover. A changed life begins with a renewed mind. Transformation doesn't happen because we wish for it. It happens because we repeatedly choose what is true, until truth begins to shape who we are. That's why Proverbs tells us, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Everything. Your words, your finances, your relationships, your habits, your future. They all flow from what's happening inside you. So perhaps the greatest mistake we make is trying to change our behavior without changing what feeds it. We pull the weeds, but leave the roots. Soon enough, the weeds return. Real wisdom doesn't just cut off bad fruit, it transforms the tree. Maybe that's where you find yourself today. Maybe your struggle isn't money. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's procrastination. Maybe it's pornography. Maybe it's bitterness. Maybe it's overtrading. Maybe it's constantly seeking approval from people who were never meant to define your worth. Whatever it is, don't just ask, "How do I stop?" Ask, "What pattern have I been practicing?" Because patterns can be replaced. One decision, one conversation, one prayer, one act of courage, one wise choice at a time. Don't underestimate today's small decision. A single seed doesn't look impressive, but given enough time, it becomes a tree whose shade may bless generations. Your habits work the same way. The choices you make today are quietly building the life you'll live tomorrow. So choose them carefully, because your future isn't built by dramatic moments. It's built by ordinary decisions, repeated faithfully, long after the excitement has faded. That's how character is formed. That's how freedom is found. That's how wisdom takes root. If today's message encouraged you or challenged the way you think, I'd love for you to join us here at Grounded in Wisdom. Every week, we explore timeless principles for money, character, and purposeful living. Not just to help you succeed, but to help you become the kind of person who can wisely handle success when it comes. Until next time, remember this: your life moves in the direction of your repeated choices. So stay grounded, choose wisdom, and keep becoming the person God is shaping you to be.